All right, so everyone, welcome to the Boston Office 365 user group. Thanks for coming out. Quick note, we are recording this session. If you don't want to appear on a recording, just don't talk. Otherwise, you should be good to go. So why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm one of the organizers of the group. My name is Dimitri. I work for a company called Trend Digital that I helped co-found about a year and a half ago. Along with me, we have Mike Dixon with Wellington Street Consulting. And David Losey sends his regrets. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us today. So, quick poll. We want to learn a little bit more about how people have learned about this user group. We see a lot of new faces today. So if you have not participated in one of these polls before, could we just get a quick round of hands? Who found us through Eventbrite? LinkedIn? Meetup? YouTube? Twitter? Facebook? Email, our website, friends, colleagues, other. Who's walking out of this building and was convinced to come back in? Okay, so we typically start off by doing a quick recap from last session. So Dave Pileggi gave us a great case study about how Staples is leveraging Office 365. We do have the recording on our fairly new YouTube channel, so if you'd like to check it out, please take a look. And then we'd like to cover what has changed in Office 365 since we've last met. So a big thing happened. We had our SharePoint North America conference that took place shortly after our last session, and there was a ton of updates that came out of that. It's not possible to distill a 3-day conference into about 5 or 10 minutes. So I broke down some slides that kind of highlight the key things. And I'm going to do a really fast walkthrough. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. We could talk more if there's any interest in any particular topic. So the first thing I want to bring up is that the admin experience for Office 365 is getting better. We saw things like the SharePoint Online preview being rolled out a few months ago. And now there's a whole lot of really cool stuff happening around the advanced threat protection, which really gives you a better insight in terms of what's happening within your environment, where is mail flowing, what are users that are violating your DLP policies most frequently, things along those lines, and it just aligns with Microsoft's commitment to having a secure cloud that you have control of. Everyone's heard about GDPR. Most of us probably haven't really looked into it unless it affected us, but there are a whole new set of regulations around European users. And Microsoft has updated their DLP policies to offer the ability to find GDPR data that might be in your tenant. So if that affects you, definitely check it out. I think it's a great add-on. We're seeing some improvements in PowerApps. So PowerApps is a no-code / low-code solution, and it's continuing to evolve and become better and better at what it could be doing. So the latest addition is that we are now able to have a full canvas and move objects around and place them pretty much anywhere, which is gives us a lot of flexibility that we didn't have before. So kudos to Microsoft for building on that. We're seeing some new features being added into the Office client suite. One is around a dictation where you can actually speak to your computer and it will record it. This was huge in the 90s with software like Mavis Beacon, but using cloud technology, things have gotten a lot better. And there's also some interesting highlighting features coming to Word where you can actually highlight different verbs or nouns or adverbs and get more of an interesting look and feel to the format of what your paragraph looks like. So pretty cool feature. And again, this is starting to roll out with the latest releases. Office 2019 is available in preview for Macs. We all love Macs in this user group, so we toss the slide on every once in a while when there's something cool to report. There's a lot of new things coming in Teams. Microsoft is releasing Teams updates probably on par with how they're treating the rest of Office 365, really making it a first-class citizen. And a lot of cool things coming with how the phone routing you can configure in Teams now. So if you do have experience with Skype for Business and setting up trunks in multiple countries and having complex routing rules, more and more of that is coming to Teams. We also have the ability to create teams based on a template from a different team, which is huge, especially if you're trying to start to more templatize how you collaborate, what kind of files, folders, the whole 9 yards, bots that you want to have for a given channel. And then there's also a new concept of where you can configure a life cycle of a team and actually schedule the retirement of a team after a certain duration. So a lot of cool things coming in with the new APIs that are being released.
Those available now, or were they just announced?
Many of these things were just announced at the SharePoint conference in North America. That being said, a lot of these are already rolling out. Some of this functionality I'm seeing in my tenant today. My tenant is also first release. If you read the blog post, you'll probably get more timelines.
You guys are more than first release, though, aren't you guys tap?
Not for our prod tenant, no.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I have a demo tenant that's just regular first release, and template things already there. The protection policy expiration stuff is been there for a little while. Actually, it's probably great. Yeah.
SharePoint 2019 has been announced, and it's shipping later this year. You can get a preview version of it now. Microsoft pretty much releases everything first into the cloud, and then every few years takes a snapshot of what they have in the cloud, they port it back to on-prem. So you'll always have a little bit of a lag if you're strictly on-prem, but they're bringing some really cool things like the modern team sites, like the communication sites, the better OneDrive experiences. So if you are running a hybrid environment, it still makes perfect sense to upgrade it to 2019 once this becomes available. Microsoft also announced a cool concept at the conference around something they call SharePoint Spaces, which is basically navigating your SharePoint content using a HoloLens or other mixed reality headsets. So if you wanted to virtualize your content, if there are product images like they use in the example, it's a cool concept. We'll keep an eye on it to see how this evolves. For those of us just joining us, we are recording the session, so if you do not want to be in the recording, just don't talk. So next cool feature, you can now connect your existing SharePoint sites into an Office 365 group. So this is really helpful for those sites that have been around before groups have been around, or in the future if you want to change your group association. When you do this, it adds the standard group membership information into your site. So again, just another way to bridge some of the gaps between the old SharePoint stuff and the newer stuff. SharePoint Online is also getting the ability to handle metadata in a much more easier and user-friendly way, as well as creating new modern list templates, which is also a new feature. The list templates are pretty cool. You can save your fields, or you can even save content within them. But now this is coming to the modern experience, which is pretty cool. There's a ton of stuff announced for intranets as well. I'm not going to read this entire slide. But there's some new web parts where now you can leverage the hub sites to pull content from different sites and filter them in new ways. If you're browsing a news article, you can actually save it for later if you want to come back and read it later, kind of as like a bookmark within the platform. You can mention people in comments. You can deem specific sites as being organizational news, so they appear on your Office 365 home site. There's audience targeting that's being brought forward into modern components. There's special flows being developed specifically for page approval. There's a number of new ways to organize content. Previously, if you had 500 files that you were uploading into a library that had mandatory fields, they would all be checked out to you until you filled in all the metadata and you saved them. That is no longer the case. You'll now see, everyone will see your files uploaded, and you'll see like a red arrow around those fields that you're missing. I have a screenshot of that. And then there's some approvals around it. If you wanted to join your site to a hub, you can make it so that you have to approve it before it happens. So just a few quick screenshots to show you. We have the Hub News web part, which gives you new ways of formatting the layout as well as deciding what the news sources are in that right panel. We have this new save for later feature at the bottom here, where as you browse your morning intranet news, you can save content you want to come back to at lunchtime or whenever. This shows some of the new functionality, including in the top right corner, where somebody has clicked to publish this page, but it requires approval. So instead of previously firing off a flow that would say your page is pending approval, you actually see this inline directly in the button, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, the ability to add custom metadata to your news insight pages, which is a component that I know we personally customized in the past to get this functionality, but it's great to see that it's becoming available out of the box. And last but not least, there are some new web parts coming to your communication sites. In this example, we have the new out-of-the-box weather web part in the top right corner. So just more and more new toys for us to play with as that web part panel keeps growing. So another cool thing is there's a lot of intelligence and automation that Microsoft is tying into SharePoint sites. For those of us that play with the developer tools and the cognitive services that Azure offers, there's a lot of interesting APIs that we can call and hook into. Microsoft is taking that one step further and allowing us to hook directly into those APIs out of our lists and libraries. So without going through all the details, some cool things are, the ability to go and run a flow. And in this particular scenario, there's a bunch of Twitter feeds that are being captured into a SharePoint list based on a certain hashtag. And then we're using Azure services to go and do a sentiment analysis on those and report back if it's something positive, negative, and give it an appropriate shade of green or yellow in this case. So stuff like this before would require writing a bunch of code to accomplish. Now we have a bunch of clicks that we could do with flows and some easy to follow tutorials to achieve the same thing. We're also seeing new ways of formatting our different rows. So if we did want to not use display templates, not use SharePoint Designer, but actually have a more user-friendly way of changing how data is displayed. That's coming as a new feature. Similarly, we're seeing things where the media services can now take a look at the images that you upload and start to classify them. So in this case, there's a receipt that was uploaded, and the media services column sent the image off to Azure Processing. Azure came back and said, we're pretty sure this is an image of a receipt. And then in some cases, we could also start to apply other tagging, like if there's geotagging within the image file, you took it on your cell phone, it can go back and say where this picture was taken. So pretty cool things coming there.
Can you read the receipt?
So there is OCR functionality. If you actually look at that last column here, it is the media service OCR. It's not going to give you the same thing like OCRing a PDF file where you see it in line over it, but this enables this to be searched. So if somebody runs a search, they'll return back this metadata and it'll point you in the right direction. So we're pretty excited about that. So there's new updates coming to OneDrive and team sites. So people tend to delete files and then want them back, and they're not always versioned, or somebody may make some change but want to revert the version. And in the old way of doing things, if that happened to you, you would have to call Microsoft, open a ticket, revert the entire site collection back to a previous snapshot, depending on when that was last taken. It was not an easy or a pretty process. So to mitigate that, Microsoft is enforcing a 100 version minimum across all libraries in both SharePoint and in OneDrive. You can increase the version number, but you can't lower it. Now, if you are a developer, you can use the APIs to force whatever number you need on that. But out of the gate, everything's going to be versioned, and hopefully this will reduce the challenges your users face with having to get back older versions.
We also do it because of autosave. The autosave now, and autosave generates new versions, so people were sometimes losing things. The other one is that OneDrive does the ransomware protection. If you don't have versions, we can't to a point-in-time restore. So this some methods. We also last month increased the amount of pooled storage we give you. So when we turn this up, we know you're going to get more storage that you need. So we give you some more tenant storage as well to accommodate that.
That's what true. So do they use like shredded storage to help reduce the size?
Well, that's that's our challenge inside of Azure. But
yeah, and the storage increases, Chris mentioned, I think it was like 20x what you had before. So there's plenty of storage to go around. Some new capabilities for OneDrive, especially around the mobile client. So you're able to use it as a scanner by scanning a document by basically holding it and letting it take a number of pictures as you go down. There's new abilities to sync your camera's gallery from your phone into the cloud. You also have this new ability to block downloads. So if you want to share a file or a document with somebody to let them view it in the browser but not save it, you can now do so. So that's pretty cool, especially for sensitive information. A number of other things, but mostly around really giving you more control over what's happening in your tenant and better analytics to see who's viewed what files and how often. Another cool feature is that you can now create planner plans directly in your modern team sites. So long gone are the days when you had one Office 365 group tied to one planner and that was it. You can now have multiple plans in a single modern site and navigate it all from that same modern interface, which is pretty great. I don't think this is my last slide for updates. So there's also Microsoft Todo, which was been in preview for small businesses for a long time, and then recently got the enterprise blessing. But essentially, this is like a quick task manager for yourself, and they've added some new functionality where you can now share it with external people, as well as create subtasks to help keep yourself more organized. I haven't personally spent a lot of time playing with this, but it's definitely on my to-do list to check out. So thanks to Turn Digital for sponsoring the session. Without our sponsors in general, we wouldn't be able to have these events. Huge thanks to Microsoft for letting us use the space, and we rely on our sponsors to help cover the overhead costs of running the group, as well as provide food for everyone. So, without further ado, pass it to Chris Bortlik.
All right, so I mentioned to a few folks already, I had an unfortunate wardrobe malfunction earlier. My zipper broke my pants. If you see a little safety pin that stays in place, I can have time to go home. So I might stand behind the podium for a few reasons. One, so the microphone will pick it up, but the other is just in case the safety pin goes away. So, so again, hi, my name is Chris Bortlik. I'm an architect at the Microsoft Technology Center upstairs on the 4th floor. You see a lot of familiar faces, a few new faces. How many of you have been to the Technology Center on the 4th floor? Awesome. Yeah, so what we do upstairs is we're a resource for our enterprise customers to help with strategy briefings, design sessions, proof of concepts, workshops, etc. I've been with Microsoft for a little over 10 years. My entire time has been focused on our productivity tools, so certainly SharePoint on premises, as well as Office 365 really the last 5 or 6 years. Before I joined Microsoft 10 years ago, I was actually a Microsoft customer for 14 years. Actually working with SharePoint since 2001. Mike knows this. I was actually working with a guy named Chris McNulty at John Hancock. We own the US SharePoint environment together. So, Chris and I go way back personally, as well as working together on SharePoint. So the session that I'm going to spend, we have about an hour or so. How much time? Give or take? All right. Cool. Is talking about assembling an engaging communication site. How many of you are using communication sites already? About half of you. How many of you are using hub sites? A few less of you, right? About the same. Cool. So this session really, it's not going to be a super deep dive. What I want to go through is some of the foundational building blocks of what our strategy is around comm sites and hub sites, and how we can actually start to bring together all the different bits and pieces across Office 365 into a site that's more engaging for end users. Right? It's not really about just pushing news out at people. How do we actually build an environment that accepts feedback from people, potentially automates business processes, and really builds a way that actually engages our audience. So that's really the spirit of this talk. I'm going to cover off on 4 main things. First off is some of the key architectural concepts, just to level set everyone on terminology between team sites and comm sites and hub sites. What do these things actually mean? Where are they different? Where are they the same? What's our strategy around them? I'll go through some of the building blocks of a solution. So I built actually an experience that I've been building out for the past year for the Microsoft Technology Centers. So all 50 MTCs worldwide share a global platform that we use for demonstrations. As part of that, I've actually been building an experience that we use globally, as we call it an IT web experience, for an example of an IT website that can be used in a company to communicate and engage with their employees. So I'll show you kind of what the use case was around that, what some of the core functionality we wanted to demonstrate as part of it. I'll actually show you a demo of it, and then I'll talk about what were the components that I used on the back end to actually build that. Then at the end, I'm going to go through some resources that are out there, including a roadmap slide, which will cover off on some of the things that Dimitri showed, but actually go through some of the timeline on when some of those things will ship. So a lot of those things were announced at the SharePoint conference. I'll share what I can publicly around that. Some things are still under NDA on when they're going to ship, but I can at least share publicly with you, those things that I'm allowed to share roadmap. Some have already shipped, some more are coming this month, and then the remainder of the things I'm going to share with you will be out there sometime in the fall. So that's kind of the goal for the next hour or so. Sound good? All right. So within Microsoft, certainly we've had, with SharePoint and SharePoint on premises, a number of different site templates. And over the last year or more, we've started to modernize the team site experience to start. Right? So we've had certainly modern lists, modern pages. We've started to have the ability to have modern libraries, we started to build what we call these modern SharePoint team sites, which are attached to things like Office 365 groups, and even things like Microsoft Teams leverages these modern team sites on the back end. All the while, we've had our classic publishing sites that are out there and are still in use and supported, and companies like Microsoft are still using the classic publishing site experience to drive things like our corporate intranet and our corporate HR website, our corporate IT website. But we've also, around the same time, started to realize we had to modernize the authoring experience for building communication sites beyond what publishing sites have done. So we introduced something called communication sites. Again, around this time last year is really when things started to kind of go out there. I know Shire, I know Michael Ronan worked on a project with others. I did a really good case study around this time last year. We actually broadcast them from upstairs in our technology center, and I think the first or second week of July, around their experience as an early adopter of communication sites. And then a few months back at the Ignite conference, we announced something else called hub sites. And what hub sites do is, as we start to get to this modern world where we have a flatter information hierarchy, where we're starting to move away from subsites, we start to have these modern team sites, which are their own site collection, communication sites are their own site collection. How do we start to link these sites together with the loose coupling of sites? So we can start to drive common experiences, we can start to drive common things around search and navigation. As we move into these modern experiences, some of the patterns and paradigms we've used in the past for customization start to change. So really moving away from things like customizing master pages, which, as folks know, can be a bit fragile. If you customize a master page and then we change the master page, you may see some of your experiences aren't coming over. So out of the box, we started to ship a number of standard themes that you can apply to modern team sites and modern comm sites. Sean Squires has helped to build a theme generator that actually allows you to build your own themes. It basically defines an XML schema that you can upload and actually build your own theme that people can pick from a standard corporate theme that might have your color and your different branding style there. Along the same time, we realized that people want to have the ability to start to automate part of the provisioning process, right? So when I provision a new site, maybe I want to create some standard attributes, some standard lists, some standard content that's there. And again, maybe I want to do that through a set of persistent site actions that when I create a new site, go ahead and run what we call site designs and site actions to actually start to automate some of that process to make it easier to start to templatize some of these sites. So if you look across the top, really the hub sites are the technology that allows us to unify these different modern site experiences. Themes allows us to apply a more consistent brand without customizing the master page. And site designs allows us to start some more automation around services for provisioning things at the time that the sites are being created. Across the bottom, you see more and more of our work around integrating business applications. So as we move away from things like SharePoint Designer, move away from things like InfoPath and Access Services, allowing you to use things like PowerApps and Flow to start to build, as Dimitri mentioned, approvals for workflow, using PowerApps to actually build rich immersive forms experiences that could be embedded inside of a SharePoint site or used separately. You see us doing more and more with the Microsoft Graph, which actually is an underpinning within Office 365 that allows us to get relationships between people. So understanding that, hey, maybe Mike and I work for the same manager, that's a signal. Maybe I shared a file with Dimitri, that's another signal. How do we leverage that, leverage telemetry around how often content's being viewed and accessed to actually drive personalization from a search perspective, and actually start to embed those intelligent roll-ups into some of the web parts that allow us to build personalized news experiences and personalized content for targeting content at users. And then lastly, starting to do more and more with social. So the ability to certainly have commenting and liking within SharePoint pages, but if you're using tools like Yammer as an example, allowing you to embed Yammer more easily into the pages for enabling things around commenting. So those are kind of some of the core foundational aspects. Again, classic team sites are still there, classic publishing sites are still there, but you see more and more of the investments being done in these modern team sites, communication sites, and hub sites starting to unify these experiences. So if you think about a team site and a communication site, people often ask, well, when should I use a team site template versus a comm site template? And the way I often think about it is that team sites, whether it's just created as a standalone team site or it's attached to an Outlook group experience or Microsoft Teams experience, again, by default, we've changed this behavior, so they're typically private by default. That's the default behavior now for any new Office 365 group, is that they're private. So people have to be explicitly invited and joined into the team. Typically, the use case for this might be the site that the IT department is using to collaborate on internal documents, policies, procedures. The HR department may have a team site for collaborating on new benefits programs and new things they're getting ready to roll out. So team sites are really intended for the internal usage of that team or that project. More often than not, those team members may be outside the company, so you may want to include people through an extranet, bring in a customer, bring in a partner there. And it can also be used to do things like planning committees. Communication sites are really intended to be that site that's used for the outward-facing view of that team. So my IT website example, IT may also have a departmental or divisional site that they actually use to communicate to the rest of the organization. IT policies and procedures, how do we engage to open up a support ticket, how do we order a new device? That's IT's public-facing website that others in the organization can access. Under the covers, modern team sites and communication sites actually share a lot of common capabilities. First off, they're designed to be created really quick. If you provision one, you notice they're typically created within a minute or so. They're all designed to be mobile and responsive by design. They support the SharePoint mobile app for having a rich news experience. They're both designed to support the ability to publish and share news. They both have the ability to use core SharePoint services like files and lists and libraries. And they both can be extended via PowerApps and Flow. So more and more you see us integrating Flow into things like comm sites for page approvals and workflow around that, but also integrating it into document libraries for approval and feedback around documents. You see PowerApps being used more and more as a tool to customize the built-in experience in a SharePoint list and library, similar to what we would have done in the past with customizing something with InfoPath or with SharePoint Designer. You start to look at the bottom of this picture, though, and you'll notice that, I'll just grab my little pointer here for the recording, and since I'm standing behind the podium. Microsoft Team, modern team sites are associated with the team site design template, and they're connected to an Office 365 group. Because of that, the permissions are managed via the Office 365 group. And it's also managing the permissions not just for the team site, but also for all the other connected services that are built on top of groups. So Planner, Microsoft Teams, Stream, Power BI, et cetera, that are connected to Office 365 groups are managed through the same set of permissioning. Who's the owner? Who are the members? Now, a user could create this if you've allowed for self-service provisioning, or you could lock it down and have it created and managed through admins. Comm sites actually have a few different design templates available. One is what we call the topic design or the showcase design, which are different page layouts for the landing page, or just starting off with a blank canvas. Comm sites are not connected to an Office 365 group, so the permissions are managed very similar to the way we've managed permissions classically in SharePoint. And as you're going to see, over time, we're going to actually start to enable Yammer by default because customers may not want to have commenting within the SharePoint pages. Today, we actually give you the ability, again, based on feedback from early adopters, that you can actually turn off centrally the commenting on the SharePoint pages. Initially, you were turning off the comments on a per-page basis. There's actually now a setting in the SharePoint Online Admin Center that came from folks like Mike and others that said, well, I don't really want to have to go into every site and every page and turn off the comments. Give me a central off switch, especially if I'm using Yammer or other tools. And you're going to see more and more over time that Yammer will just be on by default if your company is using Yammer. So hub sites, again, is something we announced back at Ignite. We've started to roll it out. I think it's pretty much 100% available across the tenants that are out there. The idea with the hub site is we may have this HR landing site that might have associated team sites and communication sites. So as an example, I might have a site that HR uses internally for recruiting. I might have another site that HR uses as a communication site for publishing benefits information. The idea is that I may want to have certainly my corporate branding and corporate logo in the Office 365 suite and navbar, but I may want to have specific navigation that's shared across these different site collections. I may want to have rolled up news where I'm rolling up and aggregating the news from the different subsites or the other site collections, if you would, that are associated with the hub site. So if you look at the screenshot here, I know it's hard to read, you'll see news that's coming from the Giving Campaign site, the Contoso HR site, employee relations sites, et cetera. So again, I start to get a rolled up and aggregated view of the news, not just from the top level hub site, but the other associated site collections that are there. So we give you the ability to get that consistent cross-site navigation, the news roll up, but we also start to build a common set of search and a search scope that spans across them. You might have heard us talk about the move away from having subsites. In fact, there's an off switch now inside of SharePoint Online where you can turn off the ability to create subsites. Dan Holm from the SharePoint team, I think, has been pretty strong in calling subsites the devil's spawn, just because of some of the challenges historically with subsites around just permissioning and breaking inheritance. And if a subsite needs to be moved later on, it's not very easy to do. It breaks the URL, it breaks permissions and other things. So we realize companies have invested in subsites, and there are a lot of subsites out there, but you may want to turn off the ability to start creating any new subsites. HubSite starts to give us the ability to do something similar to what subsites have provided, but gives us a looser coupling between the sites, so that later on we can change those relationships as our business needs change as well. So if you look at what a HubSite is, first off, again, an end user or an admin could create a modern team site, or could create a communication site. Currently, the way the hub sites get created and enabled are via admins doing them via PowerShell. So there's a set of PowerShell commands you can use to designate which sites can become a hub site. You can also designate which users are allowed to actually associate their site with the hub site. So as Dimitri mentioned today, we don't have the workflow approval around when someone can actually request their site to join. So one behavior you could do is say this group of users for this hub site are allowed to associate other sites. So you may not want everyone in the company that has a team site or a comm site to be able to associate their site with the hub site. As I mentioned before, though, the hub sites bring the common navigation, the ability to apply a consistent theme and logo. So if we apply a theme to the hub site, the other sites that are associated will inherit that theme and that logo that's there. So they get a consistent look and feel, not just the nav, but also the theme and logo. And as I mentioned, the big value is the roll-up of the news activity, as well as that ability to scope the search between the hub site and their associated sites.
So how do you create the association between the team site, communication site, and a hub site?
Yeah, I'll actually show you that.
If they're not under the team site?
Yep. Yeah, and that's actually the purpose of the hub site, and I'll show you that. So the idea is that we create, one or more different team sites or comm sites. We then create a site we designate as a hub site. We run as an admin the PowerShell command that makes the hub site available. And then actually in the site you want to associate, there's actually a site action that shows up that actually allows you to say, associate this site with any of the hub sites that I have the ability to do. So I'll actually walk you through that.
It doesn't matter when you create a hub site?
Correct. Yeah, in fact, again, we've already had team sites and comm sites out there for a while. Hub sites are relatively new, so we don't expect you to just create brand new sites. We expect you may want to associate existing sites to a brand new hub site.
Can you have one hub site that has two different team sites linked, one communication site? And based on user account, it would bring you to the appropriate team site, so both users can get to the same communication site, but the hub user login would move you to a different team site.
So I'm not sure I'm following the use case. So I have a hub site, and a hub site's associated with the team site and the comm site.
So I have a comm site that I want 3 different departments to see.
Okay.
But I want 3 different team sites. Can I use the same hub site and just have all 3 team sites assigned based on user account, which one it would fall on?
Yeah, so let me make sure, and I'll show you an example actually. So I actually have a hub site that I call my top level intranet. I have an IT website, an HR website, and a finance website. Right now, because I'm still building it out in the shared environment, I've restricted access so that only I can see the HR site and the finance site. When people go to the hub site, they won't see the news roll up, they won't see the search for the sites they don't have access to. So I think that might be part of the use case. Now, a key thing to know that today, the navigation at the hub site, when I show you the bar, that is static right now. That's not dynamic. So it's not security trimmed and it's not dynamically changed. But the content within it that gets rolled up inside of like the news web part and the associated sites, that information is coming through search. So that is security trimmed. Yeah.
Can you turn off the common navigation?
Yeah, you just wouldn't create one. So if you mean at the associated site?
Have the hub site that some of the associated sites have their own?
Yes, I'll show you actually an example. So when you look at this picture as an example, here is the banner from the hub site, and then each of the sites has their own site level navigation. So there's a common navigation bar that comes from the hub, and then each of the sites that are associated with the hub has its own site level nav as well. Yeah. And I'm going to show you some more of this in a kind of a live demo in a second. Michael?
Did they announce anything in Vegas around using hub sites as content hubs, so I can publish content types across all the sites in a particular hub?
No, we did not. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Team site commissioning?
Yeah.
Is it not a best practice to, how there's the SharePoint site runs back into the team site, Microsoft Teams?
So Microsoft Teams connected to a modern team site. Yeah.
Right, so you say open in SharePoint.
Yep.
Would it not be a good idea to break permissions on that SharePoint site and then like assign separate permissions?
Yeah, it's just for the recording. Yeah, we strongly discourage, if possible, to not break the permissions on the associated modern team site. Because again, remember the idea with these things being connected to Office 365 Group, we want to have a consistent set of membership services that go across. If we start to break permission inheritance within inside of SharePoint, you may get some weird behavior inside of Teams because now I browse to a files tab and I can't get access to it. Plus, remember, there's other associated services connected to the group, like Planner and Power BI and Stream. So while you can technically go into the modern SharePoint team site and you can start to break permission inheritance, one of the most common reasons why I find people will want to do that in SharePoint is because today Teams doesn't support private channels. That is actually coming soon from Teams. So the idea is that once we have the ability to say, I'm in a team, let's say I have 4 channels, I could hide one of the channels and make it private to only a subset of people. That will then hide the associated folder inside of SharePoint, and that'll actually then permission all the right assets.
While we're on the topic of Teams permissions,
Yeah.
is there a view-only permission that's coming to Teams?
Nothing that I've seen announced. There's an owner role and a contributor role. I haven't seen a team viewer role announced.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, the idea that typically when I hear people saying they want to break the permissions in SharePoint, it's because we want to hide maybe these files or folders for this channel. Again, you can do that right now, but I would say once we get private channels, which are coming soon, because it will limit not just the file access, but the conversations and all the other assets that are in the tab. Because again, Teams is much more than just the files stored in SharePoint.
We actually want to do the opposite and not hide it, but like expose it to a bigger group than the team. So.
Yeah,
Can you do that?
You could. Again, I would just say, do it at your own peril, your own risk, right? Because we're trying to manage all the access to an Office 365 group to all of the resources. Yes, you certainly could break the permission inheritance, and you may have a valid reason why you want to do it. But just remember that, again, SharePoint is just one service that's connected to Office 365 groups and connected to the team.
So if you have, I'll be quick, but if you have content that you've been collaborating on in your Microsoft Teams,
Yep.
and now it's ready for public, you want to, distribute it to the company, I guess
Yep.
I'm looking for what's the best practice for publishing that out.
Yep. So one thing is you could use like a Microsoft Flow to move the file from a private site to a public site or a private library to move it to somewhere else. That's one practice. And actually inside of SharePoint, there's actually now the move commands and the copy commands in the library themselves. So I would say that if you're using this as a private area where we're staging it, you may want to have, just for clarity to people, this is the private working site and this is the public facing site. And whether it's automating it through a flow, where there's some sort of approval, and then we go ahead and we move it from A to B and we remove it, or again, just basically going through the move command that's in the SharePoint Online document library to say, move this from A to B. That might be another way to think about that.
I saw that, but it didn't seem to allow me, I could move from one team to another, but it didn't seem like I could move from a team to a SharePoint site.
You might have to do it inside the SharePoint environment
Okay.
instead of Teams. So if you go inside of Teams, and again, I want to kind of just move on just for the interest of the time here, and I'm happy to talk with you there. But if you're inside of, because it's kind of off scope for the session for tonight, but if I'm inside of Microsoft Teams, it has a modern SharePoint team site, I can pop open the site into SharePoint Online on the browser. You have the library. You should have the ability from there, because it's just a regular SharePoint doc library, to click on the file, click the move command, and then move it to another library. Yep. You're not going to see that exposed inside of Teams. Although we did announce at Ignite, not Ignite, the SharePoint conference, that we are adding some more integration between Teams and SharePoint. So we're going to actually have the real SharePoint doc library experience inside of Teams. So today, it's Teams kind of view on the library, which means you don't see the sync button, you don't see the metadata, you don't see those sorts of SharePoint features. We're working on pretty soon having that. The other thing they're working on is that if you rename a channel inside of Teams, it doesn't rename the folder right now in SharePoint. Or if you go into SharePoint and you rename the folder, it doesn't reflect back inside of Teams. They're actually working together to make sure that if I rename on one side or the other, it doesn't break the association between the folder in SharePoint with the channel inside of Teams. Hey, Dave. So, again, part of the challenge we're trying to solve here with the hub sites, as we talked about, is first up that you have certainly different assets that might be built by third parties, company-wide sites, record center sites, policy sites, et cetera. You might have different applications and portals that are being built out there. You might have, again, all these different team sites that are associated out there. And then you have a whole bunch of different communication sites that get created. And what the hub sites are trying to do is, again, to allow you to have that loose coupling between these flat sites with each other. So the idea is that the HR site, as a hub site, can be related to the new hires and benefits comm sites, which are basically, again, HR's view out to the rest of the company. They can view, again, onboarding material for new hires, benefits material. But again, HR might have a team site that's private for just HR that can also be linked through that hub site. The fundamental benefit here is that what if you reorg and then later on you wanted to move this big win site to be associated with HR instead of whatever site it was tied to before? It's no longer trying to, again, break that out from being as part of another site collection, worrying about the URL changing, and having all those sorts of challenges that go with and trying to take a sub-site out. This gives you a much looser coupling, again, between the hub site and the associated team sites or comm sites as well. So again, communication sites, again, is really the evolution of where we've been going around classic kind of publishing experiences. Again, we think that it's a much more modern way of creating and editing these pages. Again, it's built on top of the same foundation that the modern team sites have from a page editing experience and news and being mobile by design. It has really rich integration with a number of different Office 365 services. So some out-of-the-box web parts for bringing in video from Microsoft Stream, conversations embedded from Yammer, as well as the ability to bring in other information from other services through connectors. And as I talked about, having search to make it easier to discover information across these sites as well. So with that, I wanted to kind of walk you through the example that I'm going to spend the rest of the time on. So as I mentioned, about a year ago, I was part of a team across the 40-plus Microsoft Technology Centers that needed to build some new experiences with communication sites. So we decided to mimic this based off of what a company might be trying to do from an IT experience. So Microsoft has an internal site that we call IT Web. So I modeled it somewhat off of what I experienced as a Microsoft employee. The key requirements that we had here was that I wanted a landing page for IT to communicate with the rest of the company. I wanted to be, again, tied into the rest of the corporate intranet. We wanted the ability to publish news and announcements such as security alerts that might be coming out. We wanted a calendar to publish a training schedule of upcoming IT events. We wanted to provide some support services, so both community engagement as well as employee self-service for things like ordering a new device for an approved list of IT devices from a device catalog. And we wanted a way of engaging with our internal employees to get feedback on IT services. And then lastly, I wanted visibility into usage and adoption of the service and have the ability to bring in some reports and information. Again, I wanted it all integrated inside of one experience. I didn't have to hop out and go to a bunch of different applications and sites. And I wanted to bring together a bunch of different building blocks across Office 365. Because again, as SharePoint has become more and more focused on the core services of enterprise content management, web content management, a lot of the other capabilities have been put into other parts of Office 365. So Forms, PowerApps, and Flow for a lot of the Forms experience. Power BI for the reporting and analytics. Again, Yammer is the enterprise social platform. So integrating the rest of those core services into a consistent user experience. So with that, let me show you the IT website. The other key thing when we were building it is I wanted to have everything built as much as possible with out-of-the-box capabilities. Because I wanted this to be a showcase to customers to show kind of what's possible without doing extensive coding and customization. So starting off here, this is the SharePoint home experience, which folks have probably seen before. You'll notice that, again, this view is personalized to me, and I'm seeing news from the sites that I'm following. I'm also starting to get recommendations of other team sites that are out there that I may not have joined, but we might want to suggest that I follow that site that's public to look at some of my news. You can see the sites that I'm following. So again, I'm an owner of these sites, so I already have created the Intranet site, which is a hub site. I have an IT website, but I'm still in the process of building out a site for finance and HR, which again, I see because I have the right rights on it, but I've suppressed it so no one else across the other 40 or so MTCs can see it while I'm still in the process of developing these sites. So this is the IT website experience. Again, I built this with just an out-of-the-box template. One of the first things that if I get out of there and I start to kind of narrow this a little bit, again, you notice that the site is responsive by design. So as I took that website and I basically narrowed it to a much more of a mobile-looking view, that hero web part that had the 5 different tiles on it now moves into more of a gallery view where I can kind of flip through it. And this is something that a lot of customers had been building as custom web parts in the past. Even Microsoft, if you look at our Microsoft Web, it looks very similar to that. If you go to our top landing page, we have basically an image rotator that's going through 4 or 5 different images that we had to build. So this is an out-of-the-box hero web part. Biggest challenge I had when building this was actually finding, number one, appropriate content that I wanted to post, and number 2, finding appropriate imagery. So I actually have a link at the end to a few of us are good friends with Sue Hanley. Sue did some great blogs as part of her work with Computer World One of the ones she did back last July was actually, I think it was the top 8 or 9 tips for getting started with comm sites. She talked about some of the thought process around the content. She also provided some great links to some sites that provide images for free without being charged additional kind of royalties that are useful inside the public domain, as well as sites to locations where you can buy additional imagery if you want to as well. Now, part of what I wanted to do here is I want to engage from a support experience. So if I click into the support page, I'm seeing this, again, this is just, I'm not a designer, as you're going to see, but I wanted to build this support experience for employees to engage with IT. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to do is I actually went ahead and built a bot to build a knowledge base for IT employees, people that are coming to the IT website. So oftentimes we have a lot of standard questions. How do I order a device? How do I go ahead and find XYZ content? I'm actually on the board of a company called Ask HR that they're actually building a bot for HR. The idea is there's a lot of standard questions that you see from an HR perspective. When is the open enrollment period? How much vacation time do I have available? So more and more our employees are expecting this sort of a bot experience, certainly inside of Microsoft Teams and Slack and other channels, but they're also expecting it embedded inside of their intranet experience as well. Again, I'm used to doing it as a consumer. I go to the Verizon website, I hover on the page for 30 seconds, this little woman pops up as a bot and says, hey, I'm here, how can I help you? I'm used to that kind of modality, and I know that I can ask her the question, and if I need to, she can transfer me off to a human as needed. So I built this bot really quick using a service within Microsoft called Q&A Maker, as well as the bot framework inside of Office, inside of Azure.
Is that out of the box, the bot feature?
What's that?
Is that out of the box, the bot feature?
Yeah, so again, what I use is I use a Q&A Maker as a service. I use the Microsoft Bot Framework, which again are both Azure platform services. So it didn't require me to do any code. I basically said I wanted to build a new bot inside of Azure. I wanted to connect it to the Q&A Maker, and then Q&A Maker gives me the ability to put in a set of questions and answers that it's going to respond to. And then all I did is I then took the bot has different channels. A bot can be communicated through Slack, through Teams, through Skype. The bot also has the ability to communicate via a web channel. So I took the bot, and then I just embedded that inside of basically an iframe on the page. So I didn't have to do any custom code. Now, if I wanted to, I could do things like extend the bot with Lewis, which is language understanding and intent to make the bot smarter. I can integrate the bot more with some of the Azure cognitive services to do language translation and other things. But yeah, out of the box, just using Azure platform services, the bot service and the Q&A Maker service, and then I just embedded it inside of a page.
This may be a little vague or customer centric.
Yeah.
We're going up to meet with a customer and they keep saying no customizations, no customizations. Would you consider this a customization from the perspective? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to just engage with the bot because one thing, I'm in the process of migrating the bot, full transparency. Oh, it answered. So I could have saved myself. So I'm in the process of migrating the bot from the preview version of the bot service to the GA version. And once in a while, the bot will time out on me that I haven't used it long enough. But yeah, it depends on the company. I mean, to me, this was a no-code solution. Yeah, I had to go into Azure first off and spin up the bot service and connect it to Q&A. But once that's there, I can actually show you real quick.
But if it's sort of native Microsoft out-of-the-box stuff, any upgrades to a SharePoint Online would keep the bot happy moving forward. IT just doesn't want to keep fixing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that once that bot is created and it's attached to the Q&A service, you could allow a person outside of IT to manage the questions and answers that are there. Or you could put the bot, point the bot at something else like a list that's there.
Can you deploy the bot as a web part?
Yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing here. So the bot is just, it's not a web part itself, but I'm just embedding the bot here. So I didn't have to actually do anything. I didn't have to build a web part. So let me just kind of move forward with this, right? So the idea is I have Q&A Maker. It has a standard set of questions with a standard set of responses. So I often engage with the bot. The bot says, how can I help you? Well, a very common scenario in IT is, maybe I'm onboarding a new employee. So you can say, how do I order a device? And I can mess up my language and phrasing there. And it knows that, hey, there's a form that's online. Again, I can pretty this up, make cards, and do other things. And this is a really quick and dirty, bot that I spun up in a couple hours. So I click on that, and there's a form that I've already built using PowerApps and Flow that actually is embedded inside of the site. So David Lozzi, who Dimitri mentions, one of the organizers here, we've been running together a workshop the past few months called App in a Day. There's a Bot in a Day workshop we do as well. that Jim has done, as I'm looking, that's what I'm thinking. So Jim's done the bot in a day workshop. We have dashboard in a day, we have app in a day. So the app in a day workshop, we actually spend a day together building this form. What I've done is I've now embedded this Power App form inside of a SharePoint site. The idea is that maybe there is an approved set of devices that IT allows me to order from. Now again, because it's Power Apps, it doesn't have to be embedded inside of a SharePoint experience. It could be a standalone app that you access through your mobile device. But the idea is what this bot is doing, this app is doing, is the Power Apps form that in this case is connecting and storing data in a SharePoint list, and it has a Microsoft Flow workflow that's being used for approval. It's tied into the Microsoft Graph, and again, this is a no-code solution, so it's just looking up in the graph, it knows who I am. Again, my persona in this environment doesn't have a manager associated with it, but the idea is it knows what devices I'm allowed to order, so I can go ahead and say, maybe I want the Dell Inspiron, and I want to compare it to the Lenovo ThinkPad, and as I scroll down here, I want to compare these two devices, and it basically gives me some validation that says, hey, you know what? You have to pick a device before you can order it. And again, this is my demo environment. For now, it's defaulting me to be the approver. In the real world, you'd pull the manager from the Microsoft Graph and you'd make the field read only. But the idea is I'm going to go in and say, well, I want to go ahead and pick the Dell device here. Go ahead and submit it for approval. And now we'll go out and actually kick off a Microsoft Flow workflow that will route this device request to the manager for approval. And of course, I can go in here and see my prior history of, I always seem to pick the same device. It's not intentional, but I always seem to pick the same Dell Inspiron device, but I can see the different device order requests that I've submitted. What's that?
So you really like that.
I really do, although I just got a Surface laptop. I legit went through this process at Microsoft, and I got a Surface laptop last week. But I do. I love our OEMs as well, Dell and Lenovo. So again, quick scenario again, common thing. Users go in there. They may not want to, search for a website, find a website. They may want to engage with the bot. I just got an email that device order request got approved. So I'm pretty happy there. The other thing on the support site, again, is I may want to have community engagement, community support. So a lot of times there may be certain apps and services that IT may not offer the same level of support. It might be best effort or community-based support. So on the support page, basically it was telling you, hey, you know what? If you have a question, go ahead and ask the bot, or you can go ahead and post your questions out for the community to get broader support from the broader community. Microsoft does this a ton. So again, we have a number of different Yammer groups across the company for different things like SharePoint and Teams, really meant to be a community of practice. We're embedding those things inside of pages like this. So again, even if I'm not a Yammer user on a regular basis, I can see Yammer embedded inside of this. And again, this is just an out-of-the-box Yammer web part that has integration with different Yammer groups that, again, someone can view the page, they can engage, ask a question, answer a question, get a response. And the key thing is that this web part is embedded and tied against a specific Yammer group. So it's not posting to the all company feed. It's actually attached to a specific group in Yammer that's related to community discussions around IT products and services. So I go back to my homepage. I explored kind of some of the things I can do around support. I have different examples around training and onboarding and the benefits of working from anywhere. But what I want to do now is I want to move on to the next part of the scenario, which again is I want to engage with my users to ask them for feedback around IT products and services. So I built a form that again uses the out-of-the-box forms integration with the web part with the communication site to allow someone in IT to build a really quick survey. So PowerApps is great for some more advanced forms. Mike, I think you just did a session, was it a couple months ago, around forms versus PowerApps. So forms is really great for quick quizzes, quick surveys. It actually started off in education with our education customers. They wanted quick little ways of doing, again, little polls, kind of Survey Monkey type quizzes, polls rather, but they also wanted really to do really quick and simple quizzes where we ask questions, we give answers, we get feedback. Same idea here. I might want to do a survey. I don't want to use the old SharePoint survey capability. I want to actually use Microsoft Forms. So I go in here and actually see, again, embedded in the page, the user doesn't know this is actually coming from Forms. I've just embedded a form in the page. So I can go ahead and see that, again, what's my satisfaction with IT? It's wonderful. Oh yeah, I work in the IT department. And I'm going to say, how can we improve our services? And we're going to say we need, oops. you need more budget, right? So if you give me more money, I can do more things. So I can go in and I can go ahead now and actually submit it. And again, this could be an anonymous survey. This could be a survey that allows more than one response. But again, I get that ability to engage with our employees and actually submit forms. One of the cool things that we actually did a workshop again with David and his team last week. We actually did a more advanced app in a day. And the idea was that we actually took data from a form and submitted to the form, and then actually had a flow that took the data out of forms, stored it inside of a SharePoint list that collected information, and then built a Power BI dashboard that then reported on that information over time. So while Forms is there, you can store it in Forms natively. Forms has some basic reporting and dashboarding. You can export it out to Excel. Because there's actually now integration with Flow, you can actually trigger an event whenever a new form gets submitted, trigger a flow that can then take some sort of action, like write the data to another data source, like a SharePoint list as an example. So I've gone in and I've given some feedback to IT. I've ordered a device. I've talked to that little bot. Now I want to stay up to date on some of the emerging security threats that are out there. So again, more and more employees are used to not reading a long blog post or reading a long article that's out there. They're used to leveraging video content. So again, in this case, I'm actually leveraging and embedding videos that are part of Microsoft Stream. Historically, people might have put large videos in SharePoint. Back on prem, we had the podcasting kit for SharePoint, which was really fun to support and use as an end user. We went ahead and we migrated certainly capabilities like that into Office 365. So initially it was Office 365 Video, which on the back end leverages Azure Media Services. So if you think about like NBC, they use our media services to live stream events like the Olympics. They use our media services to play back those events on demand. So if you want to watch Olympic events on demand. We took those platform services and built them into Office 365, initially through O365 Video, which had a SharePoint front end, and have recently started to move that into Microsoft Stream, which allows us to have some richer capabilities than what was available before in O365 Video. So the idea is I can certainly use Stream as a separate video platform, but I can also, again, embed these videos as part of a portal experience. So if I go in here, I can see that there's been 177 views of it, 9 people like it. If I go ahead and start to actually play the video, though, you're going to find that I have the ability to actually search the content. So we can do real-time speech to text. You actually can build a transcript. And now I can jump to the point in the video where that word is actually being said. We also have the ability, if we want to go ahead and turn on captions. So if we have our own caption files that have been done, this is really important for people that might have disabilities. We think about accessibility. Not everyone viewing video content has the ability to hear. So how do we make our video content more accessible to people that have hearing impairments? And if we actually look at the full Stream portal experience, not only can we do the speech to text, we can also leverage the cognitive service on the back end to do facial recognition. So Dimitri started to show an example of how we're leveraging some of our cognitive services for things like optical character recognition inside of images. Again, we're taking the Azure platform services, and as that video got uploaded into Stream, we did the speech to text, we built the caption, we built the transcript that we can search and navigate. But we also have the ability to now look at who's speaking in the video. So if I go ahead and I look at, let's say this gentleman's our CEO or CIO, you see he's speaking here. Well, let me jump to the next point in the video where he's talking again. And again, just by uploading the video, we're able to do facial recognition on the video and tag them in the video without me having to go in there and actually find the person. Okay, it makes it real easy to go ahead and start to jump around. Yes?
That not available in all the plans?
So I'm not licensing expert, but I believe that the facial recognition and the speech to text is part of the E5. But again, this is all part of Office 365. So, yeah.
And not available in E3?
So Stream is part of E3, but some of the advanced features around facial recognition and speech to text, I believe, are E5 features.
Facial recognition is in E3 too.
It is now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's weird academic.
Yeah, again, I'm not a licensing expert, so there's so many different plans for small business and education and government and all that. So I would say there's a matrix that's out there on the service description site that says what features are available on which plans, and there's different plans for education versus enterprise versus government. So your mileage may vary on availability, but again, everything here is available. It's a question of whether or not it's available in your subscription or not.
So how does it anchor that people? How does it identify those specific people there?
So Azure, as Dimitri was showing you earlier, has cognitive services. So cognitive services like facial recognition, cognitive services like speech to text. So when this video got ingested, Azure processed the video. It went through and it found the faces through our facial recognition services and actually tagged them automatically. So it's just using the Azure platform services that are there on the back end.
So if that guy on the background, he would have turned his face, it would be tagged.
It might have. It might have. Again, I haven't tried that, but yeah, if they're in there, then it would. Yeah. Yeah.
It'll also pull static pictures of faces that are used as like clip art and things like that.
So yeah, I've gone in. I've seen some video that's out there. I think the last thing that I wanted to show as part of this is announcing that. So here's that events web part. So again, bringing in a calendar of events. So maybe there's a training schedule that's out there. Maybe I want to spotlight and feature, certain documents. But I also may want to start to showcase additional resources. So there, if I had taken the time to scroll down instead of going to the bot, I could have seen that IT put out a link that told me how to order a device. I just chose to go ahead and search for it. I could look at the classification guidelines that are out there. But maybe I have the right permissions that I actually want to look at our usage and adoption of Office 365. So I have a link here that allows me to view the adoption information within Office 365. So as part of Office 365, we actually have something called the Power BI Usage and Adoption Content Pack. What I've done is I've taken data from that adoption content pack, and I've used the Power BI web part for Office 365 to actually embed the report in the page. So now I don't have to go into Power BI to see the report. And I can see that, again, this is our demo environment used by the 40 or so MTCs across the world. Content gets refreshed on a scheduled basis, typically within a week. So this was last refreshed on 13th, so it should be refreshing soon. But again, I have the ability to start to go through here. And again, maybe I want to look at, what's my adoption of OneDrive for Business across the company. So now I can go in there. Of course, I can pop out and view it directly in Power BI. I can access the filters that are there. But again, I can start to get some rich insight without having to leave the portal, without going to another place. It's just embedding this directly inside the page, again, to give me a much richer and more immersive experience. Make sense? Any questions so far? So again,
How do you calculate the adoption rate?
how do we calculate the adoption rate?
Is it just a recent view? How many people-
So if you can see the screenshot, which I know you can't really look at too well here, let me zoom in. So the way that this looks at it, I'm going to go back up. And again, this is something that's freely available that you have access to right now. If I just go here, I'll just show you the legend. What this is looking at is it's telling me the users that are green mean that they are enabled to use the service. So it means they have a license assigned to them. The ones that are showing up as black are actually active, so they're doing some explicit action. Now how that's defined is it depends on the service. So exchanging explicit action is like sending or replying to an email. Yammer might be replying or liking a comment. Different services have different actions that are there. This red button is month-over-month returning users. So people that came in April and then came back in May is a returning user. People in yellow, this is the first month that they've used that service. And then people that are in this other red are cumulative active users. So each of the services has their own metrics that determines how we classify an active user, but it's typically more than just you browse the page or kind of lurking. It's typically you took some explicit user action. And then as you go into each of them, for example, on the OneDrive one as an example, I think it starts to actually break things down by different types of events. And again, because it's a Power BI report, you can start to mash this data up with other data sources to, again, build a more customized reporting experience. So, all right. So I wanted to just kind of break down what you saw there. So started off, it was a SharePoint Online. Oh, actually, I didn't show you one thing. My bad. Let me go back. So this isn't fully complete yet, but I'll show you kind of where I'm going with it. So you might notice that at the top of this page, there's an intranet link here. Again, this isn't done. I'm still in the process of building it out. It's actually doing a hackathon project on this later in July. But the idea is that this is going to be the corporate landing page, this is going to be the nav bar that is inherited across the different related sites. You'll see that I'm, having information on connected to the CEO, but you'll notice here that this news is the hub level news aggregator. So it's rolling up news that was published on the intranet site versus news that was coming from the IT website that's associated. Now, I don't have news on the other sites yet, but what I can see here is I'm also showing here the connected sites. So I was mentioning earlier that I have access not just to the IT site, but also the finance and HR site that are associated. Again, I haven't populated them yet and made them public to other people, but once I do, you'll start to see recent activity and usage, right? So it's noticing that for me, I was in IT web. These are some of the recent pages that I viewed within the last 20 minutes.
Are you saying you can associate hub sites to other hub sites?
No.
Okay.
Nope. What I'm saying is you can associate sites to hub sites. So one of the questions earlier was if I go back to this IT website, if I go to site info, I'm on an approved list of people that's allowed to associate a modern team site or a comm site to a hub site. In our demo environment, because I have hub sites available, you'll notice that I have a choice of tying it to no hub site, which is the default behavior. I've tied it to the intranet hub site, and then one of my colleagues created a hub site to show associated content inside of Canada. Hub sites cannot be tied to other hub sites, and a team site or a comm site can only be tied to one hub site right now as well.
You could link to a different hub site in the navigation bar.
You can certainly link to it, but you're not going to get all of the other hub site type benefits, like the theme, the scope search. But yeah, you could absolutely go into the site here and then add a link that's pointing somewhere else. But remember, these are a static set of links. It's not going to be dynamic, and you're not going to get all the other hub site benefits of being associated.
So you said that you cannot connect a communication site to more than one hub site right now?
So a comm site or a team site can only be tied to one hub site right now. Yeah. And that's intentional, right? Because remember, the hub site is pushing down to the associated sites. The navigation bar, the theme, the news, it would be really awful user experience if one site was now, I don't even know how you'd rationalize the theme and the nav bar and all that stuff across multiple sites. So it's intended that it's a one-to-one relationship right now.
Well, in your example earlier, when you were talking about, you had your diagram up, you were talking about HR having access to the rewards and recognition page. Wouldn't that be a page that you might want to have everybody have access to?
Well, this is a comm site, not a page, right? So,
right.
So everyone can have access to it. So associating something with a hub site doesn't drive the permissions. So we can have a comm site that is set up for view access for everyone in the company. In this case, I think this is actually, this is a comm site. That's view access for everyone in the company. And if someone goes to the HR hub site and they have access to see it, they're going to see that rolled up in there.
But could you have that comm site go to the travel program site or the sales program site as well, so it's on their hub site?
Because again, it's the rolled up news, it's the nav bar, now you can certainly put a link on those other sites that link to it, but they're not going to see it rolled up with all of the other things because it's tied to the hub site and it's getting its theme, it's getting its navigation, it's getting its search roll up from the hub sites associated with. Yeah, you can certainly always link to any site, and it's going to get indexed, so if it's public, it's going to show up in search results and other content, but it's not going to get the benefits of the hub site.
Can we link that recognition site to another hub site?
No, again, as I've said a few times, a team site or a comm site can only be tied to one hub site. So you see this link? I can't have this site also linked to the EMEA site.
But you can change which hub site.
You can change the association. So if I wanted to later on, like if I have this, right? So let's go back to my IT website. And again, I'm not going to do this right now, but let's say that I no longer wanted this tied to the intranet site. I can move it to the Canada Showcase site. And once I do that, it's going to pick up the theme, the nav bar, it's going to change the search scope and all that to be associated with the hub site that I changed it to. But I can only have one site that's associated to here. Now again, I certainly could build links to things.
If you were to do that with all the rolled up content that you had associated with, that you had rolled up into the hub, would that just suddenly break?
Well, it's not going to break, it's going to change.
Okay.
right? Because again, what it's getting from the hub site is, so if I take a site out of a hub site, that site's news is no longer going to show up inside the hub. It's no longer associated. Again, under the covers, it's basically changing the search scope. On the associated site, it's going to change when I change from hub site A to hub site B. It's going to change the nav bar, that static link. It's going to change the theme and logo. And again, it's going to change the search scope that it's part of. And then its news and activity are going to feed up to the other hub site.
Would it require another search crawl for that change to happen, or just in the scope?
In practice, it does take a little bit. I haven't timed it. I don't know if you have, Dave. I mean, do you guys change them much? I think once you have it set, yeah. It is because it's part of the search index, but it's not like you have to wait 3 days.
Yeah.
Right? It's generally within, my experience, like 15, 30 minutes. Again, I haven't personally timed it.
Yeah, if it says change in the search scope, then you may not even need to crawl again, right?
Well, it's got to change, I think, the relationship. And again, remember, under the covers, I'm not as sure, so I'm guessing it's using things like the content by search web part, which are things like that, right? It's driving its results off of the index. It's not pulling that stuff in real time.
In the last couple of days, there was a problem, right?
What's that?
In the last couple of days, there was a problem with the ability to find, the search from the hub site to the various sites underneath it in the last couple of days.
Okay. That's all that. Beautiful, beautiful. Back to where we were. So, again, breaking this down, SharePoint Online, you saw our comm site, which was the IT website. You saw our hub site. That was how I drove that integration with the intranet. Leveraged the out-of-the-box pages, news, web parts. That security video was stored in Microsoft Stream. Use the Stream web part to embed that in the page. The IT satisfaction survey was using Microsoft Forms. Again, leverage the out-of-the-box web part to embed the form inside of that news page. I used Yammer on that support page for that community discussion to embed the Yammer group in there. I used the bot service in the Q&A maker to build the IT web bot, which drove me to link out to the PowerApps in Flow solution for the ordering a device order form. And then I used Power BI to surface the Office 365 usage and adoption content map that brought in those usage results. So resources. A few of us talked a few times again. Sue Hanley is a tremendous resource of a variety of different skills that she brings. She was on that SharePoint Swoop episode that a few of you saw. I had the pleasure to write 2 books with Sue and Scott Jameson, so I got to know her really well back in the SharePoint 2010 and 2013 days, kind of dating herself. Sue continues to do a great job speaking, working as a consultant, blogging. She still writes for Computer World. So one of the posts that she did was actually done around this time last July, based on some of her experience working with Mike and Dave at Shire on some of their experience as an early adopter of building communication sites. And again, rather than me trying to summarize or plagiarize what Sue did, I want to just kind of point you there because she has really great tips on some of the lessons that they learned. And again, as I showed, building a concept that looks nice is relatively easy. Finding the right images, finding the right content, thinking about those sorts of things, that is really where more of the challenges are. Sue, about, 2 weeks ago, came out with a new article around similar sorts of experiences and recommendations around hub sites. Again, some of the advice will depend on the size of your company. I work with some smaller companies that having one hub site, that's your intranet, and then having an HR site and an IT site associated works great. I've had others that are much larger, like Microsoft, where we're going to have, and we do have multiple hubs, and we're already pushing against the boundary we have right now of how many hub sites can be there. Right, so we might have a hub site for HR-related sites, a hub site for finance-related sites, a hub site for IT-related sites, because Microsoft is 120,000 people. We're not going to have everything tied to one master hub site. So Sue has some good practical guidance and experience around how to think about hub sites, some of the pros and cons of having multiple hub sites. So again, good set of resources to check out. I wanted to just kind of close here on some of the roadmap. So Dimitri, I'll make these slides available if you all want them. I know some of it's hard to view, especially from the back. This is a slide that actually Mark Cashman from the SharePoint team presented at the SharePoint conference in Vegas a few weeks back. So I asked Mark yesterday if there was an update to it. It's basically publicly still the same information. Again, SharePoint conference was about 3 weeks ago. So you might have already seen that Q1 had already passed. So we already had the Yammer web part out there. I showed people before we started We built a wonderful Kindle web part, and a lot of people are waiting to have their Kindle information on the SharePoint site. We built that. As Dimitri mentioned, having the planner web part is a huge thing. It's the ability to embed and integrate different plans. Some of the basic things, right? The ability to say, I want to promote a page and publish it out there as news. Having the ability to have hub sites that are out there. Starting to enable the ability to do site scripts and site theming. So some of the work that Sean Squires and Vesta has been doing as part of the patterns and practices. About a week ago, we actually introduced something called the SharePoint Starter Kit, which is a good open source solution out on GitHub. Actually having a starter kit of resources, common web parts, and common patterns and practices that if you wanted to build things. I know Dave has been kind to share some of the stuff that Shire has done, both in terms of presenting at the SharePoint conference, presenting at Ignite, putting out there on his blog. So again, trying to share back with the community some of the work that Shire did as an early adopter. But again, some good stuff that's been done there. Q2, which ends, I guess, next week, is when a lot of these other things are starting to drop. So again, I've already seen in my tenant, the weather web part is already out there. So those who are waiting for the weather web part. It's funny, I was talking to a customer today, still asking what the weather web part, the stock ticker web part, like some very common things that folks are still looking for. So again, we're building a lot of those just common things that people are looking for. So the weather web part's coming out. The PowerApps web part is already out there. So when I did my initial PowerApps work last year, I did a basic embed with like an iframe. Then I was a PowerApps web part, similar to the Power BI web part that I showed you. Starting to have the ability to have custom metadata to allow us to start to categorize these pages. The ability to send out a news digest when news is published. The ability to have, again, tighter integration with Teams, not just the list and library experience I mentioned, but the ability to start to pin and publish and share news in pages. So if I don't want to leave the Teams experience, but I'm leveraging some of the other SharePoint features that are tied to that team site, let me actually see that as another tab inside of a specific channel. We've also had 100% rollout of hub sites. And then, again, it should be soon. It's saying, wasn't in my tenant yesterday, but it's saying it's this quarter. It might be plus or minus a week or two. But the custom approval and workflow for page approval workflows with Microsoft Flow with comm sites. As well as, I don't know if we listed it here or not. No, so it's not listed here, but one of the things that I know Dimitri mentioned is the ability to have the flow to basically set the approval of when a site is joining a hub site. So today, you can specify which users are allowed to join sites to a hub site. Where we're going is we want the ability to have a workflow that says, okay, maybe I allow other people to request to join. Let's say Mike wants to join his site to the hub, and Dimitri's the owner of the hub. Send a workflow request for approval to Dimitri, have him review it and approve it, and then if he approves it, then add his site to the hub. That is something that they're working on. And there'll be some additional things coming out around, again, more improvements with the stream web part that's integrated there, and also the ability to do things like @mention in the comments, as Dimitri mentioned. So right now, SharePoint has the ability to have comments at the bottom of the pages. Today, you can't really take a lot of action on there. Or really actually @mention Dave to actually get him to get an alert to know that I commented on the SharePoint page. Again, we mentioned earlier, we gave the ability to turn off the commenting globally, which was a request from Dave and others that didn't want to turn it off on every single page, as an example, right? Actually give you that off switch at a universal level. So you guys can thank Dave and Shire for a lot of the initial work pushing us last year to get some of the stuff done, as well as get some of the feedback that's out there. So with that, I know I'm right around time, and I flew through a lot. Hopefully answered a lot of questions along the way, both related to the topic and not related to the topic. I'm happy to take a few more questions, Jay.
You said Yammer was coming to communication sites by default.
Yes.
Will that be retroactive? Will it be added on to existing ones, or?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't actually seen what that behavior is going to look like. I don't know if it's just going to be you have a page, and now instead of having the SharePoint comments, you're going to see some sort of Yammer comments. I also don't know what that means in practice. Like, where do those Yammer comments go? So they go to the company feed. They get tied to a group. Like, how are we going to know? One thing I know that we're working on is today we have the SharePoint newsfeed that if I use a classic team site, it still creates the team site with the classic newsfeed, which we haven't really changed in a while. Working to actually start to decommission and remove that. So this might be, again, part of that. Cool thing with Yammer now is Yammer does support using Azure Active Directory as the identity store, which means that once you associate Azure AD as the identity store, you can now associate Yammer with Office 365 groups and have any new Yammer groups start to provision an Office 365 group on the back end as well. So again, we're trying to get it more and more integrated. Now that's in our data center, now that it uses our identity to actually use Office 365 groups on the back end, which means it can start to use SharePoint for file storage and all the other things that SharePoint provides as well. So, so I don't know how that's going to be implemented. I'm waiting to test it myself. So we'll see. Yeah.
Did I hear you say that the permissions for the hub site permissions are all separate from all sites that are connected to the hub site, correct?
Currently,
And then the hub site has its own.
Yeah, so the hub site is at its base a team site or a comm site that just basically had a bit flip to say this is now a hub site. So it has its own permissions, and then let's say there are 3 other sites associated with that hub. Today they all have their own permissions as well. So permissions are managed independently. I know there's some thought and some work going into thinking of maybe other ways of securing all those assets together, but today they're all permissioned separately.
So, for example, if you had 3 sites feeding their news into a hub site, but everybody in the hub site didn't have access to all 3 sites, it would be security trimmed?
There'll be security trim. Yeah, so as an example, let's see, I take this HR example. I have an HR hub site, and let's say that I have access to the new hires and the benefits comm site, but I don't have access to benefit planning. If I go to this site, I'm only going to see the news rolled up from these 2. I'm not going to see that because I don't have the rights to it. It's going to be trimmed out of my view. That makes sense?
But all sites, permissions will inherit the common navigation and theme from that.
Yeah, so all 3 of these will still get the nav bar from the hub. They'll get the theme. They'll also be in the search scope because there may be a person in HR that has access to all 3 of these. And that person would see that news rolled up. But if I wasn't part of HR and didn't have access to the benefit site, when I went there, the content would be trimmed for me. Now again, remember, the nav bar is static. So all 3 of them are going to have the same nav bar. So you're not going to have that nav bar today because it's static. That is not security trimmed. That's a static set of links. And again, I know there's some work that's going on there to maybe not make it static, but today it's all static on the hub nav. Yeah.
You had taken that form and said you could get the data out of a form and then into a SharePoint list. Do you have to do an upload to do it to export it to Excel and then another flow to, I'm just trying to figure out how you do a flow to get data out of the form.
Yeah, so Forms itself natively has some basic reports and the ability to export to Excel. So Forms itself has some basic reporting, including that export capability. There is a out-of-the-box flow now that can take the data from Forms and put it wherever you want it to be. Yeah, so there's a Microsoft flow now. Mike, do you have a question before?
I did. For hub site themes, if you define a theme at the hub site level, is it possible to make exceptions to that? Can you break theme inheritance?
Not that I'm aware of, Dave. I don't know if you've seen that. Not that I'm aware of.
Not today.
Yeah.
Not today. Okay.
Thanks.
Can you use Flow to update items on SharePoint list?
Usually, yes. There's actually a session that Jax did at the SharePoint conference. I believe he put out a blog post around the same time. It's not as straightforward as a normal power user may want. There's some knowing what the APIs are, but I actually saw him do a demo at the SharePoint conference where he built a solution in SharePoint that actually was an HR interview process. The idea was that there might be 3 different hiring managers, 3 different people in the interview loop rather, and they want to submit their responses to a SharePoint list. And basically they were using Flow to change the permissions for who could see what items inside of a SharePoint list. So the answer is yes, you can do it. It's not as simple yet as it could be, but look for it's Chaks, C-H-A-K-S. It was around the time of the SharePoint conference. He put out a blog post showing how to use Flow to manage permissions inside of SharePoint.
Also, David Losey did a presentation about Flow just a few months ago, and that's available on our user group's YouTube channel.
What's the interface, if you go back to your gigantic diagram
Yeah.
thing, what's the interface to see all of the hub sites that you have? So if I'm part of the HR team and the sales team, how can I get to either of those hub sites?
So a couple of ways you can do that. The simplest way I would think of is just going to the SharePoint home. You're going to see the sites you're following. So Intranet is a hub site. finance, HR web, and IT web are basically associated sites. So I can see all of the sites that I'm following, as well as, more importantly, the sites that I've recently accessed as well.
I see, so this is the SharePoint home.
The SharePoint Home, yeah, the SharePoint Home is really the aggregator for all of the sites, whether it's a hub site, whether it's a site I own, a site I participate in. This, for me, is really the landing page to aggregate everything right now. Yeah.
So when will we be able to update the SharePoint links in the web to our own site?
So you want to change
That
this? And what do you want to point to that?
to our own custom site. Right now, it's just.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of someone to do it, but I'll tell you what I've seen as an example is I know Microsoft actually is doing like well, I don't know how much, I've actually seen us do like a redirect. So I've seen if I go to the Microsoft tent and I hit the waffle, I notice that it actually does a redirect and sends me somewhere else. That might be because we're dog fooding. Because I don't think you can actually change in here to actually do a redirect off of it. So I'm not aware of us doing anything.
That would be a good feature that will just give end user flexibility, whatever site you want to point to, instead of sending you to that one site where everything's just kind of messed up.
Again, my biggest suggestion, you're familiar with user voice. So there's a website called User Voice. I'd go out there and see if others have submitted it, give that feedback, see what others vote. I know from a product team perspective, they listened to that and they've made changes. For example, changing groups from public to private was based on customers giving feedback. I also know there's a desire though for consistency, that for some of the top level of branded icons, we want to have a consistent experience. So as people go to different tenants, different environments, they have a consistent experience from a product perspective. And if people start to override kind of our product links, they're never going to see us adding new features and capabilities. So not saying that it's something they wouldn't do, but I'd give the feedback in user voice. Dave?
I was just gonna say, for about a year and a half, you can add your own links.
Yeah.
To this as well. So
Yeah.
You can add like your intranet as a separate app.
Correct.
You can get it there.
Yeah.
For a long time, they said that they were adding the ability to push that out to
Correct.
everyone in your company. I have no idea if that ever came because I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah.
But no. So you can add it, but then someone has to choose to pin it into the.
Yeah, so as an example, so again, this is our demo environment. So Microsoft, to your point, Dave, is we've pinned MSW, which is our web, as another tile there. This is our MTC shared environment that we have, ServiceNow and other apps that are available to me. But to your point, if I wanted to, I can go ahead and, as a user, pin it there. But again, I haven't explored recently the administrative ability to then always pin something up the top for the user, but at least the ability to customize this is there right now, and the ability for the user to pin a certain app to the app launcher as well.
There's one more option too. If you have a logo defined for your tenant, that would appear
Yeah.
right in the middle of that sweet bar across the top.
Yeah.
And you can have that logo linked to anything that you want.
Yeah. Yeah, that I've seen as well. It's a good point. So right here, if I had a logo here, you can make that clickable, and that could link to something as well.
Although, Chris, if you're on first release, that logo won't be in the center anymore. It'll be, I think
Yeah,
I've seen it
it's
on
on-
the release tent, it's on the left now.
Yeah,
Left of SharePoint.
yeah, this tenant is in first release. I just don't have an image that's up there.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. Mine's like that.
Yeah.
No, Dave and I were looking at it yesterday, seeing two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be a few weeks ago.
Yammer web part.
Yeah.
The classic one will display on mobile, but the classic one doesn't display on mobile. The newer one does, but it gives you that tile format that doesn't have the pictures.
Yeah, so we're talking here. Yeah, this one says native and mobile, the one that just came out. Right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about this one here that has native, yeah.
So it's nice that you can see it on the phone, but it doesn't have the pretty pictures that you used to have of the original Yammer web part.
You're talking the one that we deprecated before?
Well, you still have a choice when you embed the Yammer web part. You can pick the classic or the new.
Correct. Yes, if I go back as an example. I did this embed about a year ago, so this is more of the classic experience. Right, so this is just using the Yammer web part that I embedded about a year ago.
But if you look at that on the phone, you won't see it. It'll say it can't be displayed.
Yeah, yeah. Versus if I go over here and I go in and I say, I want to embed Yammer. I can go ahead and find, I don't think I have any groups here, but to your point, I can pick and choose just top conversations, the latest ones, or to your point, go ahead and use the classic version.
Right.
So what's the question?
So the question is just the newer one is not as nice, and a lot of, well, at least where I am, they don't like the new one because it doesn't have the pictures.
Okay.
you know, like you get a preview of the YouTube or whatever,
Yeah,
the
okay.
stream. You don't get that with the newer one.
Yeah, I give them that feedback on user voice. Again, they're very responsive to changing things based on customer feedback, so.
Yeah, they've heard that feedback, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim, too.
Yeah, I'm sure they have. And again, the good thing is that the more of you that are on there, the more that you voted up. Again, they legitimately, when they prioritize, like those quarterly releases, they often put in parentheses internally the number of votes on user voice as the justification for adding or removing something from, they call them different semesters, kind of the quarterly sprints. They're based on largely things we want to do, like SharePoint Spaces, but also things that people give us feedback on via user voice and support. Is there any question?
Somebody asked a question before about how you determine what sites are connected to where. And you referenced the SharePoint page, but that doesn't differentiate whether it's a team site connected to a hub site or a
Right.
hub site with these sites connected, right? There's no place to.
Yeah, there's no view that I've seen right now from an end user perspective. I know that I'm not going to go into it right now, but the modern SharePoint Admin Center can differentiate between the different site templates, but even that doesn't show you the association anywhere. So I haven't seen us publish anything right now. And the data is there. I'm sure there's APIs and stuff you can pull up, but I haven't seen a site. Well, here's almost like you used to have like almost like a Visio type view that here's the information architecture, here's the hub site, and then actually draw me like an org chart that shows all the related sites, almost like the picture that we put in PowerPoint. I haven't seen us build like a org browser view of the hub site. That's a great idea. Actually, to navigate the view. It's pretty cool. That sounds like a good partner opportunity. Build a hub site browser.
There's a PowerShell command you can run to list it out.
Yeah.
That's not very pretty.
No, I agree. The data is there because that's how we're using it.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen us build a nice rendering data.
There's a sites website that shows you all the sites that are joined to a hub site. So it won't tell you all the hub sites, but on your hub site, you can see all the
Correct.
associated sites. That's a big piece of this.
Yeah, that's this thing here, the connected sites, right? So when you're on the hub site itself, if you have the right rights, because I own these sites, I see finance and HR. But if I was someone that didn't have rights to finance or HR, those would be suppressed from me in the view because again, it's security training. But that is the closest thing I've seen right now, is that sort of a view.
I think Visio used to be able to get the association of all the sites easier.
Yeah, Visio, yeah. Again, it's a good idea. I put that out there to say, we'd like a visual representation. And we have the data. It's just a matter of building the visualization. Go.
Two questions.
Sure.
One is, can you require people to follow certain sites?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And the other one is, so on your SharePoint homepage where it shows you all of your aggregated news items, if I'm in the IT department and I'm not following the HR department, how do I get news of open enrollment? So
one way is we start to actually suggest content. The other thing that is coming soon, which I think it was on that list, I think Dimitri talked about it, is we realize that not all news is created equal. So there's the idea of corporate news, which is CorpCom, then there's departmental news like HR news, then there's team and project news. And we recognize the need to have the ability to prioritize certain news, the ability to pin certain news. So I think that as that capability starts to roll out, I'm sure there'll be the ability to say that even if you don't follow the HR site or the corporate site, we want to pin that. So as an example, I went to our Microsoft Web today. Satya Nadella, our CEO, put out a statement internally to us around some of the immigration stuff. And actually, when I went to MSW today, there was a big piece of news that was like pinned to the top of our site around Satya's statement. So I would imagine that in the new world, Satya would want to make sure that his news and announcement showed up prominent. And then when it was ready, that would roll off and it wouldn't get buried underneath everything else. So, Mike?
And another method of doing that might be to use the new News Digest and push it.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting to pull.
Yeah, so as we have that News Digest, the email News Digest, having the ability to actually subscribe and push that out almost like a newsletter of some of the news that's coming out there. The thing that I like is I use the SharePoint mobile app, and I'm tied to a number of different comm sites internally. Dan Holm and Chris McNulty, and those guys are always publishing news on the SharePoint sites. As I follow them, I get an alert on my phone. It'll pop up, and I know, hey, Dan just published the schedule for the conference that they're doing, who's speaking at what thing, and I get alerts to that just on my mobile device.
How do you do the connected sites roll up? Is that a dedicated web part, or is that a?
Yeah, this is just a web
I'm not
part.
seeing that as a web
Yeah, you need to be on a hub site. So this is a special web part that shows up on a hub site.
Question about branding. So I noticed that when you apply a theme to a modern site, that you have an option to apply a classic theme, and it will loop through it and create a modern version of it, including the background. I tried creating the classic theme on the site collection I was working with. I was just using it out of the box one, right? It wouldn't let me add the files to that. Is that something that's not available to do? A, and B, is there slots available in a modern theme that allow us to apply background images?
Yeah, I haven't played with that. Have you, Dave?
There are not background images today inside modern themes. You can do light or dark, I think.
Yeah.
Like there's a theme generator that will give you.
Right. Yeah.
Colors and it auto generates it, but it actually generates about 25 slots.
Right.
So you could tweak that, color settings yourself, but it's just color text.
It was interesting though, when you do it, because it does, if the out-of-the-box theme has a background, you will apply the background of sort of modern UI.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if there was actually a hidden slot that you could add an image to it, in the modern.
I know they're working on continuing to evolve the theming. Denise had a session on it at SharePoint conference, so they're continuing to evolve that. Right now, it's all of those colors at the top that.
Yeah, again, I haven't played as much with this. Again, Sean Squires did a good session at the conference as well around some of the site actions, kind of post-site provisioning. One of the things they're working on as well that he showed was not just the approval workflow between when a site joins a hub, but also actions that happen after. So let's say I had an existing team site or a comm site, and then I join it to a hub site, and I want to have certain things get pushed down into those sites. They're working on site actions as well that will happen at the time a site gets joined, for lack of a better, or associated with the hub site as well. So that's something that Sean showed at the conference as well. How are we doing for time, Dave? I mean, not Dave, time, Mike and Dimitri. Good?
Yeah.
Any more questions? You all questioned out? Yeah, well, hopefully this was helpful. I know for some of you, some of this was information you've seen before. Hopefully you picked up a couple of new tips, and I appreciate all the questions and engagement. So you have slides, right? Is it these ones? For this guys?
So we have a few more slides in a raffle, so don't leave just yet. Thank you. Let's give Chris another round of applause. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about some upcoming community events. The next upcoming event is our user group meeting that's going to be a month from now. We also have SharePoint Saturday New York City coming up the last weekend of July. Registration is still open if you're interested. It's a great full day free event full of great sessions like the one that you've seen today. Definitely worth checking that out. SP TechCon is coming to Boston in August. SP TechCon is a paid conference, but it has a lot of the similar sessions where you have multiple tracks that you pick your own path. There's also a lot of training and half-day sessions. So definitely check that out. And if you are interested in going to SP TechCon, so if you're interested in going to SP TechCon, we do have a promo code for $200 off. So come talk to us. We also want to announce we are doing a joint user group with all of the New England-based SharePoint and Office 365 user groups. This includes Jim's user group in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all the way down to New York. And we're going to have a pretty interesting format for this user group session. It's going to be like speed dating, where we're going to have over 25 experts at different tables with different focus areas. And you'll be able to come and talk to them one-on-one for about 5 or 10 minutes or so. Then we're going to blow a whistle, and everyone has to go find someone else to talk to. This event is free. You do not have to be attending SP TechCon to attend the event, but you will need to do a free registration, and we'll be sharing that information as we get closer. We also do have the Microsoft Ignite conference coming up later this year. And last but not least, SharePoint Saturday New England is coming back this year in October, and it's actually going to be in this venue. That's also going to be a free event. The call for speakers just ended last Friday, and if you're interested, take a look for registrations coming in the next couple of months. Did we Miss anything? Anyone else know any events coming up between now and July? All right. We do have our local user groups. So if you like to continue learning, we have user groups just north of the border, south of the border, west of the border, as well as some other areas around PowerShell and Skype for Business here in Boston.
Some never sets on the SharePoint Empire.
So coming up, so next month, I'll be doing a session around building a user-centric intranet using communication sites. So everything that Chris was just describing today, we went through a pretty interesting project for the last 8 months or so, and we've learned a lot in building a really cool communications-driven intranet. In fact, 99% of the intranet is based on modern communication sites. So we did a lot of cool things with out-of-the-box templates, with the SharePoint framework components, using all sorts of cool things. We also were given permission by the client to submit this case study to the Nielsen Best Internet Awards. So we find out in a couple of months whether or not, we made the cut. But we're really excited, and we're really excited to share our journey and really what we did to make this an effective intranet. So before we go into the raffle, does anyone have any problems or any tips they'd like to share? Yes.
I have something I'd really like people to vote on, a user voice. Right now, there's a connector in Flow to add users to security groups in Azure, but mail-enabled security groups are not supported. It's not documented anywhere, but if you open ticket, it's not supported, so people please vote.
If you can tweet us the link to it, we'll be happy to retweet that and access the rest of the community.
Like, there's only 13 now, so I'm like, come on, people.
Sure.
So I need to integrate a SharePoint list to a SQL Server table and keep the two integrated between each other. What would you recommend for a tool?
When you say integrate, are you trying to expose the SQL data via seeing it in a SharePoint list, or you want to read-write capabilities on both?
List, it updates on a SQL Server. If updates a SQL Server, it updates on the rest.
Well, there's a lot of ways you could do it.
Okay, don't do it.
I don't know.
One is don't.
Yeah, one is that you probably don't want to do it. But on a more realistic note, you could take a look at external content types using BCS. You can also look at putting building a very lightweight function app in Azure that would front end the calls, the CRUD operations to SQL, and then use a flow to interact back and forth. Dave, if you have a better pattern.
I've got a couple. So depending on data volume, if it's flow volume, you can natively have a flow that every time the record is inserted or updated, goes and calls a SQL connector and runs store props in SQL to go do an update there. That works fine, but you're going to do one flow call for every row update. So just think about how many total row executions you get in your tenant, and if this is really high volume or low volume. The low volume stuff works great, no problem. That's a pretty cool technique. For higher volume, there are SAS connectors that can talk to SharePoint lists and be able to do a regular sync of the two.
Yeah.
SQL Server integration services. So if you've got a lot of data, you could push a lot one way or the other way.
Or a data factory that kind of schedule, right?
Data
So that
factory
you
can
can
have
have
that as well, yeah.
databases, you don't know if you want that integration in real time, but you can have schedule the database and then.
Yeah, so real-time, low-volume, flow, logic apps, any of those would work.
And every time, any ideas any problems you can foresee with flow update in the SharePoint list?
You could run into collisions where someone is already, where someone has updated it since you updated in SQL. I mean, you gotta think it's not a transactional database, so all the normal stuff that you would want to think about, it depends on your use case, the volume and all that. We can chat about it more.
Yeah, let's chat about it more afterwards. I think there's a lot of ways to approach it. Anyone else having a problem or have a tip? Anything you've learned recently? Yes.
It's a problem.
Okay.
I'm new to Flow. I have a list that I'm running an approval on. And when the approvals come in, if they click the button to approve or whatever, the version history in the list, it looks like it's like all neat. It doesn't show the person who actually.
It's because the flow's running as you.
The flow's running as you. How do I get the person's, so I guess you could go into Flow itself and look at who you sent it to, but there's no way from the list to see who.
Does Flow have impersonation?
No impersonation. So one thing that you can do, as part of your flow, you can have a metadata column that you create on your list that says approver or approved by, and then populate that with the current user as they hit the approve action.
We get it replaced every time the next person.
You can append it. I mean, you can interact with the field. But if you want to track exactly who approved each version, this story isn't great at this point. That being said, the whole approval process has improved tremendously since Flow first launched. So I expect it to continue to get better. Sorry. Any other problems or tips? Has anyone discovered something really cool that they want to share?
Sure.
Yes, Dave.
There's a new flow connector I found in last month that does approvals inside SharePoint. So you can take, as an example, we threw a nice list on the homepage of records that anyone has permission to submit to it, but it goes in the draft, and then you've got a approvals on it. So kind of interesting, even though the SharePoint page approval hasn't shipped, the back end kind of flow connector that powers it is out there in production. So you can use that for anything that requires making minor versions publishing. It works the same way as the old stuff did. It's just a flow connector.
Very cool.
I've been using SharePoint PP, if only David were here, to update SharePoint libraries. And since a team uses SharePoint libraries, you can actually use PowerShell to generate a data set and upload that file directly to your team.
Cool. Yes.
Found something cool today. I was looking for ways to present things coming from the message center in a little bit more dynamic, fun ways, and especially something that's like client visible. And so I found today that somebody has built using Planner and some other stuff, just inserting Planner now into a web part, right onto a page, but they have like all the different buckets for, basically it's like a message center feeding into a change management process. And I got all the different buckets for all the different levels of the change management process. So
cool.
That's just one use case, and there's all the tips there, or all of the steps there to actually wire it up and make it work. But you can use that for a lot of different things. But
cool.
So,
are you gonna write a blog post on this?
somebody already did.
Okay. Mike?
I actually have a new client that's running into problems. They're trying to do a lot of co-authoring in Teams. And because of the autosave feature and the co-authoring, there seems to be a lot of things stepping all over themselves. I haven't had the opportunity yet to do a deep dive and get into your root cause on this, but I was just curious if anybody else has run into things like that, and if anybody's, like, what are you guys doing about it? Are people disabling the autosave? Turn off autosave, but
We do a lot of
co-authoring.
Oh, we can get them to listen to us, but
Yeah.
they don't really know what it is anyway, but they were using saving from the desktop line, so we turn it off and have them
Yeah,
just do
because
that.
we're finding that it's making a mess of version control.
Mike, which product is this for? Co-authoring?
Co-authoring, it's both Word and Excel.
Okay, so I was gonna say for Excel, if you're on the insider track, you would have co-authoring in the client version of Excel since about January or so. But if you're on the regular release, they're not gonna roll that out until July. So if you have clients that are with different versions, you might have some really interesting behavior on that.
One super terrific thing that's very recent is the Office deployment tool for Office 365 Pro Plus now has a remove previous versions thing, so you can remove all the MSI versions that are out there.
Cool.
You gotta set it up and you gotta use an XML file and all that. It's not just when you go to Office and say I want to install it. It's the deployment tool, but it's still very cool.